part of trying to play in a pandemic has given a lot of college football players and a lot of college athletes in revenue sports, it gave them the realization they have a voice and they have power. So since the coronavirus really first took a stranglehold in this country, especially with sports, it also shut down spring practice for college football. And the question is, are they going to play? Well, they really need to play because now all of a sudden we've seen how dependent upon college football revenue these schools are. How important college football being played is to these athletic departments, because if not, they're in big trouble. Other sports, Olympic sports, are in big trouble. And unfortunately, we've already seen Olympic sports from many universities get cut. Layoffs, furloughs in the athletic department. It's going to get very ugly if football isn't played. And what that done is, at least given players the realization that they actually have power. They could stand up and get things done. And so far, we've seen it. Chuba Hubbard, a great, outstanding running back at Oklahoma State, called out his own head coach. Mike Gundy is wearing an OAN shirt. If you're unfamiliar, OAN is a very, very right-leaning news network. Chuba Hubbard did not like that, did not like what it stood for, called out his coach, and they talked about it, and changes are being made. Trevor Lawrence, after the unfortunate George Floyd murder, really was the voice for Clemson in saying Black Lives Matter and joining the movement and really pushing the entire football team towards social justice, trying to make a change. Trevor Lawrence was the lead guy for that. You had UCLA last month calling out their own head coach, calling out their own medical department, saying they were concerned that the coaches and the doctors didn't have the players' health, and they called them out on it. So players, as we see, are finally using their voice and actually making change for the good. And the latest part of that, players in the Pac-12, I believe 11 Pac-12 players signed their names to it, but claimed that hundreds of Pac-12 players backed this letter. But they essentially wrote a letter saying they are unified, they are united, they are one, and listed out demands that if the demands aren't met, if the conference doesn't take it seriously, they're sitting out. And we're going to have no Pac-12 football in the fall. And a lot of these demands are all centered around benefiting the student athlete, but also I feel like just common sense. Health protocols for playing in a pandemic. No waiver to sign that basically you can't hold the school responsible if you get sick or the medical coverage isn't what it's supposed to be. College players getting revenue. Don't cut Olympic sports. A lot of the demands are realistic and demands that already should be happening. But I'm curious, because a lot of people are taking away out of this about whether college athletes should get paid. Is a college scholarship enough for especially football and basketball players, the two that bring in the most money, but especially for football? Because football really drives the bus, and football, as we see, athletic departments and universities are fretting. If football is not played, the financial damage that would occur after that. So I'm curious, because of the power that players have, because of the importance of college football is to these universities, should the players that are bringing in the revenue actually see a cut of that? Do they actually deserve to get paid? And one of the demands they outlined in this letter was that they wanted to take advantage of their name, image, and likeness. They wanted to basically market themselves and say, I want to make money for being Trevor Lawrence. I want to make money for being Justin Fields. Or if we go back in college, I want to make money for being Johnny Manziel. And to me, that is the perfect solution where every player in every sport gets the revenue they deserve. Because let's be honest here. Some schools aren't football schools. Some schools are basketball schools. Some schools like Oregon and Oregon State, women's basketball is so popular. They have cells in their arena that if you are a women's basketball player at either of those schools, you're going to make money for being on the team. Baseball down the South in the SEC, baseball is huge. Softball is huge. Wrestling in the Big Ten, if you're a wrestler at Penn State, if you're a wrestler at Iowa, at Oklahoma State, you're making a lot of money. So for me, name, image, and likeness is the perfect solution because everyone who is popular at that campus, everyone who is good at their sport, gets the money they deserve. There's really no reason why any athlete shouldn't get compensation for their market value. I personally don't think salaries would work because it's not realistic, one. Two, not every athlete's getting a salary. It's going to mostly be basketball and football. So the college basketball player that's really good, the women's college basketball player that's really good, the softball player, the baseball player, the wrestler, the golfer, who's popular at that school because they're really good, won't get paid. It'll just be the ones bringing in the revenue. But name, image, and likeness, the schools aren't paying you. It's the people in the community. It's the boosters. It's the fans. So you get the most popular athletes on campus. No matter what sport it is, they're the ones who get paid, and they're the ones who deserve to get paid. Now, speaking of getting paid and speaking of being unrealistic, part of the demand, on top of name, image, and likeness, was that these Pac-12 players demanded that 50% of revenue from all sports go to the athletes. Now, this won't work for two reasons, and I hope that they realize this. Number one, most sports don't make any revenue. Football does, basketball does. Softball is not making revenue. Golf is not making revenue. Volleyball, hockey, for the most part, aren't making revenue. So there's nothing to split there. The reason why football is so important is because they bring in so much money that they can sponsor so many of these other sports. Penn State, I'll use this as an example because I know this well working in the athletic department. Football brings in so much money. Football is so popular and so lucrative that the athletics department is self-sustaining. They get no money from the state. They get no money from the university because football sponsors every sport there. The money they get from football helps to pay for the baseball team, helps pay for the lacrosse team, helps pay for the fencing team and the golf team. That's the case with a lot of these universities. So you take 50% of that away, a lot of these sports aren't getting played then. A lot of these sports are getting cut. So that's why, to me, name, image, and likeness, the perfect way for players to get paid and for players deserving to get paid, getting their due worth, getting their market value. Because like I said, every university, the most popular sport is different, and certain athletes, it also depends on their personality. Because guess what? I'll say this for an example. Big-time players who have big-time social media followings aren't always the best players on the team. Tate Martell, quarterback at Ohio State, transferred to Miami, moved to wide receiver. He's not that great of a player, but he had a lot of hype coming out of high school. He's a massive social media following. He will make more because he is a well-known guy with a massive social media following, more than maybe the starting wide receiver, the starting linebacker would. So whatever you're worth to people, that's what you'll get paid. Similar to every other job in this country. It's a fair market for a reason. It's capitalist for a reason. You get what the market dictates. There's no reason why every other aspect of life is capitalist except for college athletics. The amateur status is a sham, and I'm glad to see at least players realizing their power. And now the latest example is Pac-12 players putting all these demands out. Most of them realistic, by the way. Most of them realistic, and most of them benefiting the student athletes. I absolutely think players should get paid. Scholarships, not enough. And I love, finally, after being taken advantage of for so long, after being used as free labor by the NCAA, by these universities, they're finally getting their just due. So I hope a lot of other players around the country back up the Pac-12 players, and hope something really does happen here. I think it'll be good for all the athletes, and be good for finally college athletes to be on the same level as everybody else. Some interesting words Lamar Jackson used last week when describing Antonio Brown and making his case as to why he believes his team, the Ravens, should sign Antonio Brown. This is what Lamar Jackson said. He said, quote, "There's no quit with him. That's the type of guy we need in our locker room. I feel like the locker room here is different than any other locker room. There's a brotherhood going on. None of that outside noise. It's strictly inside," end quote. So Lamar Jackson, after watching Antonio Brown quit the Raiders, after Antonio Brown kick and scream at the Steelers, so there's no quitting him. That's the guy we need in our locker room. And I feel like our locker room is different than any other locker room in the NFL. Lamar, I respect what you do on the field. Your play is exciting. The Ravens were a fun team to watch last year. But you can't fall victim to the shiny object. You are so wrong with this logic and this explanation, it's not even funny. Let's go back. Well, let's take a quick trip. Not too far back. A quick trip in history. In the span of 6 months, from January of 2019 to September of 2019, Antonio Brown no-showed for the final Steelers regular season game, a game which they needed to win to have a chance at the playoffs. So essentially for them in their mind, a playoff game Antonio Brown did not show up for. Kicking and screaming at the respect he doesn't get, wants to get traded from the Steelers. Gets traded from the Steelers to the Raiders. He's there not even for one game. This is a man who gets to Oakland, fired up, and as soon as training camp starts, his helmet doesn't fit right, he burns his feet, and he cries and bitches and moans until the Raiders eventually say, you know what, screw it, we're out of here. The Raiders gave him a contract extension when they traded for him. And he said, you know what, screw it, I'm out of here. I don't want to play here anymore. Didn't play one regular season game. The Raiders released him. And we watched all that unfold on Hard Knocks. He signs with the Patriots. This is the one team he wanted to play with. He loves Tom Brady. He idolizes Tom Brady. He loves Bill Belichick. He loves the Patriots way. He signs with the Patriots. Promises to keep his act together. Span of 1 week, he was cut. He played one game and they cut him. So in the span of 8 months, he no-showed, demanded a trade, got traded, got an extension, cried, got cut by the Raiders, signed to the Patriots, cut a week later. And for Lamar Jackson to say, our locker room is different than any other locker room, we need this type of guy in our locker room. Guess what, Lamar? I hate to tell you, your locker room is no different than the Steelers' locker room. Your locker room is no different than the Patriots' locker room. Those two teams are competent organizations, well run from the top down. Great head coaches in Mike Tomlin and Bill Belichick. A respected history of success. The Roonies and what they did with the Steelers in Pittsburgh have been incredible. One of the best run franchises, maybe if not the best run franchise, maybe in all sports. With what they've done, how they've been able to have constant success, and the change they've made throughout the league. So 2 of the 3 organizations that Antonio Brown has been a part of are well respected, are competent, and are winners. You think of the Patriots, you think of the Steelers, winners. Guess what? He couldn't last there. Even those 2 teams with respected organizations, respected head coaches, respected veteran leadership. With Tom Brady, they couldn't stop Antonio Brown from being a headache. They couldn't stop him from being a distraction, get his head on straight and focus and just play football. Please tell me what makes the Ravens any different than the Steelers and the Patriots. Because I hate to tell you, Lamar, you could say that, your locker room's a brotherhood. Your locker room is different. We can handle that. There's no outside noises. We all keep it internal. We all hash out our issues. Guess what? All the locker rooms are the same. Let's be real here. It's 32 teams in the NFL. It is a war. That is the closest thing to war we will ever have in this country. Men running at full speed at each other, full contact, and hit each other. You need to be tight. You hear every player, no matter where they go, what team they're on. They talk about being close to their guys. It's a brotherhood because you need to have each other's back. It is a war mentality when you play football. So there's no real rifts. There's no drama that could really cause some division on the field because you need, when the game comes, you need to have your players back and the guy next to you knows he has your back. If the Steelers and the Patriots couldn't get Antonio Brown under control, couldn't get him focused to just play football, couldn't get the outside distractions to settle down, what makes you think the Ravens are going to do? Not to mention, to me, the Ravens are right there. Obviously, the Chiefs are the team to beat. The Ravens have a very talented team. I love what they're doing on offense. They went 14-2 last year. They're the number one seed. Sure, maybe they can use another wide receiver too. And sure, Antonio Brown, his talent makes him equal with the Chiefs, I would say, or very close. When you're that close already to a Super Bowl, when you are that close from breaking through, it's not worth bringing in a distraction. It's not worth bringing in a guy that can throw that train off the tracks, that can derail that momentum you have and ruin a season. Because guess what? He ruined the season in Pittsburgh. He didn't even give a chance. He didn't have a chance to ruin the Raiders season. And the Patriots cut him before he could ruin their season. So what track record, please point to me, Lamar, please. What track record does Antonio Brown have that you can point to say, you know what? That's a guy we want. That's a guy I can trust when the going gets tough. I know he will be there for us, have our back, and perform when we need to, when it's crunch time, when you're in the playoffs, when you're facing the Chiefs. How do we know if Lamar Jackson doesn't look at Antonio Brown every single pass? He's not going to have some outburst. He's not going to throw his helmet. He's not going to tune out and all of a sudden be a distraction. So to me, there's way more risk in the Ravens bringing him in and running the risk that, you know what, this guy could derail the train, could derail a possible Super Bowl season, than it is if he, comes in and elevates them to get to a Super Bowl. And now let's also not forget, for a while he had the punishment hanging over his head. We didn't know how long he was going to be suspended. The NFL announces at least 8 games. It was the first 8 games, and if they, find out more dirt, essentially, if they find out more what happens with his ongoing legal issues, it could be longer. But let's just say for the most part, 8 games. All right, so you're going to bring him for half a season. Still too much to me. Too big of a risk. Now, if anything, it makes it even harder to bring him in because guess what? Now you have to try to work on getting him acclimated with the offense. And for the first 8 games, you have a flow, you have a rhythm. To bring in a loud personality, a major distraction, someone whose talent is immense. Immense. One of the best wide receivers in the game. But whose distractions, whose baggage is so massive that I legitimately are concerned and can ruin all the momentum the Ravens had. It's too much of a risk. I understand his cousin, Hollywood Brown, is on the team. I understand they worked out, him and Lamar worked out this offseason. I'm sorry. I'm not touching Antonio Brown with a 10-foot pole. I don't care if my only other team's option is to sign someone like myself. If the option is sign a guy off the couch or Antonio Brown, I'm signing the guy off the couch. The talent, can't even discuss. But I know the guy off the couch is not going to be a distraction. He's not going to be the reason why the team I root for doesn't go to the Super Bowl. Antonio Brown would. He's nothing but a distraction. He's nothing but drag teams down everywhere he's been. So to me, the risk is not worth it. It is not worth it. The Ravens should steer clear from a guy who's already repeatedly, I think just 2 weeks ago, he said he retired again for the NFL. I think he's retired 3 different times. It's not worth it. The distraction is too much. The headache is too much. And when you are that close, it's not worth bringing him in. So I'm curious your thoughts. Should the Ravens sign Antonio Brown? From a strictly talent perspective, he would put them at or maybe even above the Chiefs. Maybe right there. We'll give him right there. He would put the Ravens on a level playing field with the Chiefs. But to me, that's still not enough reason to bring him in. The distractions far, far, far outweigh the talent, and the talent is immense. The talent is great. So think about how big of a distraction that he brings to them. So I am a hard no on the Ravens signing Antonio Brown.